Monday, December 5. Near-death experiences. Some of the most popular modern arguments to prove the theory of natural immortality of the soul are near-death experiences. In his book, Life After Life, the investigation of a phenomenon, Survival of Bodily Death, by Raymond A. Moody, Jr., presented the results of his 5-year study of more than 100 people who experienced clinical death and were revived. These individuals claimed to have seen a loving and warm being of light before coming back to life. This has been regarded as exciting evidence of the survival of the human spirit beyond death. Well, that's a comment on the back cover. Over the years, many other similar books have been published promoting the same idea, and we had a look at that back in Lesson 2. Read the resurrection accounts of 1 Kings 17, 2 Kings 4, Mark 5, Luke 7 and John 11. How many of them talk about any kind of conscious existence while the resurrected ones were dead, and why is that answer important? First of all, 1 Kings 17, verses 22 to 24. Then the Lord heard the voice of Elijah, and the soul of the child came back to him, and he revived. And Elijah took the child and brought him down from the upper room into the house and gave him to his mother. And Elijah said, "See, your son lives." Then the woman said to Elijah, "Now by this I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord in your mouth is the truth." And 2 Kings 4, 34 to 37. And he went up and lay on the child and put his mouth on his mouth, his eyes on his eyes, and his hands on his hands. And he stretched himself out on the child, and the flesh of the child became warm. He returned and walked back and forth in the house, and again went up and stretched himself out on him. Then the child sneezed 7 times, and the child opened his eyes. And he called Gehazi and said, "Call this Shunammite woman." So he called her, and when she came in to him, he said, "Pick up your son." So she went in, fell at his feet, and bowed to the ground. Then she picked up her son and went out. And Mark 5, 41 to 43. Then he took the child by the hand and said to her, "Talitha cumi," which is translated, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." Immediately the girl arose and walked, for she was 12 years of age. And they were overcome with great amazement. But he commanded them strictly that no one should know it, and said that something should be given her to eat. And Luke 7, verses 14 to 17. Then he came and touched the open coffin, and those who carried him stood still. And he said, "Young man, I say to you, arise." So he who was dead sat up and began to speak, and he presented him to his mother. Then fear came upon all, and they glorified God, saying, "A great prophet has risen up among us, and God has visited his people." And this report about him went throughout all Judea and all the surrounding region. And John 11, verses 40 to 44, Jesus said to her, "Did I not say to you that if you would believe, you would see the glory of God?" Then they took away the stone from the place where the dead man was lying, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me, and I know that you always hear me. But because of the people who are standing by, I said this, that they may believe that you send me." Now when he had said these things, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come forth." And he who had died came out bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Loose him and let him go." All near-death experiences reported in modern literature are of people considered clinically dead, but not really dead, in contrast to Lazarus, who was dead for 4 days and whose corpse was rotting, as we read in a lesson recently in John 11:39. Neither Lazarus nor any of those raised from the dead in biblical times ever mentioned any afterlife experience, whether in paradise, in purgatory, or in hell. This is indeed an argument from silence, but it is in full agreement with the biblical teachings on the unconscious state of the dead. But what about the near-death experiences so commonly recounted today? If we accept the biblical teaching of the unconsciousness of the dead, which we've recently gone through in Job 3:11-13 and Psalm 115 verse 17 and Psalm 146 verse 4 and Ecclesiastes 9 verse 10, then we are left with two main possibilities. Either it is a natural psychochemical hallucination under extreme conditions, or it can be a supernatural, satanic, deceptive experience. Let's look at 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 14. And no wonder, for Satan himself transforms himself into an angel of light. Satanic deception could indeed be the explanation, especially because in some cases these people claim to have talked to their dead relatives. But it could be a combination of both factors. With this deception prevalent and so convincing to many, it is crucial that we stick firmly to the teaching of the Word of God, despite whatever experiences we or others might have that go against what the Bible teaches. And so to finish today, how fascinating that NDEs, near-death experiences, often now come with the imprimatur of science. What does this teach us about how careful we need to be, even of things that science supposedly proves? This lesson was read by Dr. Percy Harrold for Christian Services for the Blind. Sponsored by the Sabbath School Department and distributed through Hope Channel Australia, this podcast is also redistributed by Hope Channel Germany, Christian Record Services for the Blind. It is also available on SoundCloud and through multiple podcast distributors, including Apple iTunes. And you can listen and watch at the same time on YouTube. Remember, God is always faithful.